it's going to change a bit and evolve a bit.
Yeah. Okay. Great. On to today's subject. We're talking Facebook breaches. Another thing very few people know about, there's been 2 breaches, one way before the current one, and we're going to discuss the current one. The current one was how many users? How many users are we looking at, Rigo?
So the current one, we've got about 533 million users worldwide.
It's about 1/3.
Yeah, so it's not the entire Facebook user base, and it seems they got caught in the process of extracting information, so not everything was stolen. And the thing to keep in mind with this is it's primarily a phone number data breach. Emails are the minority in this data leak. It is primarily entirely phone numbers, and that means there's 533 million unique phone numbers in this, because that seems to be what Facebook is using as its unique identifier in that database.
And the thing about this breach, it was actually done quite a long time ago. It didn't happen over the Easter weekend. It just was released on the Easter weekend, not so.
Yeah, I've taken a look at the account creation dates in the files that are available. And the last account creations we can find date back to May 2019. So that's around when the breach must have happened, when they actually managed to steal all this data. And then obviously it sat silent on some torrent trackers, private download sites for a while, with only a few select having access to it until it blew up now over on the 3rd of April, and everyone got the free access, I would say.
Sure. Yeah, because they were originally selling it, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. It was being sold. I'm not sure for how much, but
yeah, it's always how much. And I'll tell you, folks,
I can presume a good bit.
Yeah, I can tell you, folks, trading in leaked and breached data is a big business. It's huge. So just bear that in mind. So if you think you've got nothing to lose in life by leaking data, think again. It could be valuable to somebody, some bad guy out there. Rigo, how did this all happen? What did they do to get the data?
So as you might be aware, Facebook loves to collect all kinds of information about you, especially on the mobile applications. And on the mobile applications, there is an API which phone numbers can be submitted to. And usually that API is part of the contact address book upload feature of the Android application. Now, what these guys seem to have done is gotten themselves all the country prefix codes for all the countries around the world, and started randomly dumping brute force generated phone numbers into this vulnerable API that they exploited. And that API was then giving them back the Facebook ID, as well as the email information and all kinds of stuff that would be exposed via a marketing API that Facebook usually only provides to very select users. And that's how they managed to then extract brute force essentially most of the Facebook user base. Just throw random numbers in, catch what comes out, and keep going with the next number. So, and that pattern shows up sometimes in the database as well, when they've got sort of skipped number sequences that I know exist, that I know have a Facebook account linked to them, but it was missed in the scraping that they were doing.
And you've put some stats together. You even shocked me last night. I had a very interesting numbers night. So let's start at the beginning. 533 users globally, top 10 countries.
Let's have a look at the top 10. Screen share and slideshow going over here. I can show off some of the numbers. Can anyone see this?
It's coming. There we go.
From the beginning, Facebook, the big leak. We've got 106 countries, and the top 10 countries that everyone's been talking to about in the news media, etc., are not quite so obvious as you might think. This is what's been largely reported in the news, focusing on Europe, with Italy, France, United Kingdom, etc., being on the top. But this data breach is very much an African data breach to some extent. The top data breach you can see here is Egypt, with about 44.8 million users, then Tunisia, 39.5 million. Then comes Italy with 35 million. And the USA is only in 4th place, followed then by Saudi Arabia, France, Turkey, Morocco, Colombia, Iraq. And then Africa, this is actually South Africa, you change that. But Mexico, Malaysia, and then the United Kingdom, very last place actually out of the top few candidates. So you can see it's a very different situation versus what we usually expect to see, with most of the largest population countries appearing on the top list of data breaches. And then in terms of, Andy, do you want to ask some question before we go on?
Yeah, I what stands out for me is Italy slap bang in the middle of the EU with GDPR legislation. There it is. It's like a sore thumb. I'm quite amazed that it's right up the top there.
Yeah, I'll also look at later at some of the how the more privacy-aware countries compare. Iceland, for example, doesn't even make the top 100, so they're very much at the bottom.
And France as well, also GDPR, EU.
Yeah, France is apparently quite popular on Facebook.
Okay. Excellent. But amongst all of this, we've had big corporates, we've had government, we've had military. I know you've only analyzed the Namibian context, but I think it could serve as a comparative to others. And folks, if you represent a big organization and you want to know your organization, if it's been dropped into this breach, email us off with something we're not going to publicly release. But if you want to know if your organization was in any way affected, please email us. We'll gladly look it up for you. So let's have a look at what you've got next.
Yeah, so this is pretty much the direct breakdown of the columns in all of the databases. So primarily as the unique identifier, Facebook was using the phone number. Then there's the Facebook ID, sometimes one Facebook ID for multiple phone numbers. First name, last name. Last name is often a composite of various other added on names. We've got the gender. That's really only specified as male or female, and some are blank. So if you haven't specified, or if it's some other input, they just store blank. Then the current location that your profile is currently set at, and as well as a past location. And I've seen in some cases that this is a geolocation flag based on a geo-IP address lookup. So even if that profile hasn't input a past location or previous location they've been at, Facebook has filled this in with a city, country, based on the IP address of that user where they've been connecting from. Then there's also the relationship status. This can be married, single, complicated, whatever options Facebook provides there. Some of them are also custom and get quite detailed. Very amusing inputs in some of them that were actually breaking my data import process because they had a lot of new lines. Then there's the occupation or current status. Again, as detailed as they want. So some of these are 500 characters long or more. Then there's the account creation data. And that's usually just a date in US format with the time isn't actually stored. It's just stored as 12 a.m. So we're just storing the day, which is a bit odd. Then we've got an email, and emails are by far the minority out of the overall data breach. There's only 2.5 million emails out of the 533 million usernames, really. And then last but not least, this got a birthday, and some of them are full dates, so month, day, year, and some of them are just month and day. But just knowing the month and day, you can really extrapolate a lot if you want to figure something out about someone. And then, like I've said before, acquired through the misuse of legitimate functions of Facebook systems, abusing the app and marketing contact number submission API. And then we get to some of the more interesting stuff. What kind of inferences can we make from just looking at the Namibian data? That's what I loaded into my database and ran some SQL queries against to see what patterns we got. So for Namibia, out of a total of 409,536 accounts, we've got 28,000 approximately that report as being as part of a Namibian ministry of some form.
It's government ministry.
Yeah, government
ministry.
Yeah, and then there's 859 that are Ministry of Defense members in some form, not just directly words like that, but it can be military enlisted, stuff like that. And I poked at a few of these accounts, not going to bring them up, but they've got quite a lot of detailed information about what they're doing on base. Then obviously 2,782 of these accounts I looked at have more than one phone number linked to their profile. Most of these are just 2 phone numbers linked to a profile, and then 24 of those again had 3 phone numbers linked to a profile, and that was the most I've actually seen. Just in terms of the gender statistics, 193,000 approximately are female, 202,000 are reported as male, and then 13,000 roundabout unknown, and a few others are very broken input format data. Out of the total Namibian population, we've only got about 2,000 that have actually got an email account. That's very few of the government and ministry accounts are using an email account. They're using a phone number. I've seen very few .gov.na for Namibia. It's different for the US. I'm not going to go into that too much. And 171,000 of this, just for Namibia, actually list an occupation of some sort. And the quality of that varies. So set number 2, out of that total set, 9,880 list their birthday in full date. So you've got essentially your qualifiers for any kind of fancy phishing scam. I didn't look at how many list the partial, but it's a very significant amount, about half of the whole population. Then the relationship status is known for 110,000, roundabout, and the 186,000 have an accurate past geolocation, town or city. That means that the profile still, I did random sampling versus some Facebook profiles, that's still the same set. And 154,000 have actually moved in some way to a different location. And this birthday is really the interesting thing, because if you're a scammer, phishing, whatever, you really want to select for this population. They tend to also have the most other information associated with their profile. So about a few percent of the population always falls out that is most vulnerable to scamming in this regard. So I'm going to quit out of this one, Andy. So let's go on. What else have we got?
So I mean, it's really establishing a platform for scammers. I mean, that is a big thing there. You know, we're going to deal with the impact shortly, but it's very evident as to the scale of information available, including identity theft and various other things. Okay.
Absolutely.
Are you going to move on to impact?
Yeah, I think we're going to discuss some of the impacts all the time.
The big
What's
one.
actually going on.
The big one. We've done it in social engineering training and that type of thing, where you get a simulation where you've got a phone, a call center, and see if you can convince, for example, an operator to change somebody's details or your own details by the call center. We're going to see this from this breach, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. The SIM swaps in Namibia, with how easy it still is to obtain a SIM card and get a replacement SIM card under someone else's phone number with just a written document, is frighteningly easily. Yeah,
absolutely. So, I mean, for example, we've seen in particularly the States, South Africa, and 1 or 2 other countries where SIM swapping is prolific. It is quite a tremendous thing. Just sketch briefly what happens during the SIM swap and what happens to the victim.
So your general SIM swap revolves around getting access to the phone number and any associated identities, accounts that person may have signed up using that phone number. And generally what it involves is either convincing the network service provider, so that would be MTC in Namibia or Vodacom in South Africa, other various providers in the US, that you're the legitimate owner of that number. In the US, I know people manage to do this by calling into call centers, impersonating a wife of, say, a guy who desperately needs to put the phone number onto their shared account. And there's all kinds of reasons why that has to happen immediately, and they put the call center operator under duress to get that expedited as quickly as possible, usually. In Namibia and in South Africa, SIM swapping is usually as easy as going to the MTC store, telling them, oh, you've lost your phone number, you need to get this phone number, and you hand them a written paper that's supposed to come from the police with a stamp and a signed statement. But anyone can almost impersonate that relatively easily because the MTC employees have no real way of verifying that that document actually came from the police and wasn't just forged by someone. And that's what they tend to do. And once that then obviously is done, the provider will just issue them a new SIM card with that phone number. They pop it into their phone. And from that moment on, the legitimate owner's SIM card, prior SIM card, is disabled. The current SIM card is active. They start receiving messages, phone calls, whatever it may be, and can then use that on online logins such as Facebook, your bank profile, to receive the two-factor authentication codes. That's usually quite prevalent in Facebook and banks here, that you can also use those to reset your account entirely, especially if you have access to the phone number. And then obviously the whole takeover takes place. And if, I don't know, maybe you find a PayPal account associated to that as well, and you can go on a wild shopping spree.
Yeah. And the thing is, the victim doesn't know.
Yeah, it's usually by the time the SIM swap has taken place and the few hours that elapse before so it's actually an interesting thing with the SIM swaps. There's a sort of grace period during which both SIM cards can be active on the network and still receiving messages. And by the time you realize you're no longer connected to the network, it's often a few hours too late and it's already gone bad. Usually people don't realize they might actually be getting the same two-factor authentication token sent via SMS to them, and they might not be realizing what's happening or not realizing it until it's too late.
And the thing is, it's a cascading effect because many of us have one cell phone number. We've signed up for Facebook, we've signed up for Gmail, we've signed up for X, Y, and Z, and banking, and this and that, and bang, once that SIM swap happens, and the crooks do it, from what I understand, and particularly the modus operandi that I've looked at the South African cases, they do it in the early hours of the morning, that the victim is completely unaware, of what's going on until the next morning, and by then everything is done. It's too late. So
you wake up and your phone isn't connected to the network. There's some weird old messages. I've heard this too often.
So it is a problem. Right. Next one, spoofing. For the benefit of our audience that don't know what spoofing is, what is it?
So spoofing is when you are using a slightly modified piece of telecommunications equipment. It might be a smartphone, might be a call gateway on the SS7 network. I'm going to explain what that is differently. But either way, it allows you to impersonate someone else's phone number, pretend to be them, pretend to be whoever, change your voice maybe a bit with a voice modulation program that you can download, pretend to have really bad call quality. But the gist of it is the recipient, if they're in a call center, on their screen, usually it shows the caller's real phone number, and that's sufficient for them to identify the real caller, who you are. They correlate that to a name lookup in their database. And if you can spoof that phone number to be like anyone else's that you might want to be, they're going to believe you quite quickly.
Yeah. And it might sound like science fiction, but call spoofing is one of the easiest things to do. For a couple of bucks, it's easiest thing to do. So
you can rent a call box server on the internet.
Yeah.
Especially African network providers, spoofing is a free-for-all.
Yeah, no, it is, absolutely. So just that everybody's aware of that too, that call spoofing out of this breach is another way they're going to get around it. So they're going to use those cell phone numbers, and they're going to make calls on behalf of that person. So
especially VIPs will get selected out of this set.
Yeah, I think anybody with a high profile is going to get and be ready. I think we're going to see a lot of scams. So recently,
just to like make it clear, this is really the first time we've had a phone number based data breach of this scale. Most previous data breaches of the scale were email based.
That's right.
And phone numbers carry an entirely different weight in the world of scamming versus email.
Absolutely. No, you did right. It's a very good point, which brings me to the next point is recently we had that case study of SMS interceptions. Here we go again, because now we've got numbers and now we can intercept SMSs now.
Yeah, so even easier than call spoofing or all the other impersonation tricks is there are service providers out there which connect into the SS7, Signaling System 7. And SS7 is the network used to communicate messages, call locations, tower presence, where you are in a country, and actually connect calls between all the network operators around the world on cellular networks. But also, there can be some rogue operators that have SS7 access, and they can register a phone number in an entirely different country, often to a server. And once they register that phone number, it's often provided via servers that you can access on a website. You pay them a few dollars with an anonymous PayPal account or similar, and register someone else's phone number and start receiving messages. And the sneaky thing with this is it actually delivers messages seamlessly to both users, and the main user's account isn't even affected some of the time. It really depends on which particular gateway is being used. Sometimes they can also disable the messages that the original recipient no longer gets any of the messages of the intercepted server.
And as you were talking, just actually made me think as well. Let's go back a few yards in the sense of SIM swapping. If we've done a SIM swap, it also has a bearing on WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, all these messaging services, because all those messages are going to be diverted to the scammers.
Yeah, so with WhatsApp, it's a bit more tricky because the phone number, device ID, and some other identifiers are correlated to the cryptographic key because they're using, what is it called now? End-to-end encryption.
Yeah.
And if you SIM swap a phone and then put that new SIM card into another phone, the device identifier of that phone is different, and WhatsApp wants to reconfigure itself, and that breaks the whole end-to-end encryption. So you're not actually Signal, Telegram, WhatsApp, well, Telegram depends. Those are quite secure actually against SIM swapping.
Okay, awesome. Well, that allays that fear. Atlee makes the comment that most corporates using Outlook, it's interesting how SMS interception will be used to change Outlook emails.
Yeah, just to actually reiterate back on that. I want to say it's secure in terms of your existing messages won't be accessed.
Yeah.
But they can register the WhatsApp account in you. They can register the Signal account in you, but they won't be seeing any of the prior messages. Yeah.
So just going back to Atlee's comment, is that corporates using Outlook, it's interesting how SMS interception will be used to change Outlook emails.
Yeah. It really depends on how your Outlook Exchange verification process is set up, but I know a lot of businesses are using SMS as a fallback two-factor authentication or for password reset. So if you know an email address, you know the user's phone number, you manage to SIM swap them, intercept them, whatever it may be, it's open for business for the scammers, really. And it's actually scary to think that in the past, a lot of what's actually kept certain accounts secure has just been the lack of knowledge of the target's phone number. With this, that's removed. So you've now got 533 million phone numbers at your disposal, and a significant amount of those people will be vulnerable to this attack. A very profitable number.
Yeah, the other side of this, which is a very dark side, unfortunately, but we're going to have to, and we'll probably as professionals are going to be dealing with this as well. What worries me, for example, high profile people, victims of abuse, various other things, they may have created new accounts with a different cell phone. They're completely discovered now. And so say, for instance, a woman who's got a protection order against a stalker or something like that, that stalker has been negated by strategies that she may have implemented by changing numbers, for example, that's completely exposed now. We're back to square one again.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the big risks, and what people have been worrying about the most that I've seen on Instagram and TikTok and so forth. What women are chatting about in terms of the Facebook breach, but also a lot of misconceptions with regards to changing passwords and so forth that aren't actually relevant to this.
Yeah, there is. French PI asks, so to go back to Facebook phone numbers stored in the breach, did you have a sense whether old phone numbers were in there for each user? For example, if I joined Facebook in 2006, my real number and fixed it later by changing it to a burner number.
Yeah.
Does the database breach contain the historic numbers?
There's absolutely some historic phone numbers in this. Like I've said, for the Namibian data set, we had about 2,200 users with multiple phone numbers for one Facebook ID. And there's also other auxiliary information from the profile in the previous date with the prior phone number. So the most I've seen in the Namibian data breach is that an account had 3 phone numbers. So the current one and 2 prior ones. For most accounts, I've only seen 1 prior one, and some of the other data sets, like India, for example, I've seen some accounts with 7. So it goes back.
Wow, that's quite something. And she asks another question: have you seen services such as Dhash process deliver this data already? More generally, how do sites such as Dhash function? Do they stay away from high profile breaches? So, like that? First comment, before you comment, the first comment, we all know the favorite place for hackers to dump data is Pastebin. So it's all there.
And torrents.
Yeah, and torrents. So that's the one area where they've already released it. What have you found on Dhash?
So I haven't looked at Dhash if they've merged the data in, but if they haven't, it's going to be a matter of days at most. And Dhash already allows users to search for phone numbers, names, and companies and email addresses. So I really expect it to just show up any day now.
And just to end off the question in terms of high profile breaches, I don't think Dhash really cares where the breach comes from.
No,
they just take the data. They just index it.
Dhash is not a, how do you call it, an ethical business. They're very far from caring.
Yeah, if they can, there was another breach that we won't talk about. Well, it's the OnlyFans breach, and all that data is on Dhash. So
yeah, Parler, etc., etc.
So that was a bit of a nasty thing. Right, the biggest question I've been asked the last week is people have been asking me, what do we do? So I said, why don't you just delete your entire digital life? And I got very strange looks. No, jokes aside, what do we do? What do we do next?
Yeah, so especially if you're someone has a
I'm busy.
So especially if you're a high-profile person or concerned about first thing that I would suggest people doing is, if you have a bank account and it's linked to the same phone number as your Facebook profile, get a new phone number, really ideally. Link that up to a different phone number. If you have any secure online platforms, access portals, something like else that uses a phone number, get a new phone number associated with that, and only use it for those things. Ideally, if you have a social media account, I know Andrew might differ a bit on that in terms of opinion, but if you're going to use something like Facebook, you might as well use your leaked phone number on that. It's not going to change the security profile too much if you use a strong password and use two-factor authentication. But crucially, don't use SMS two-factor authentication. Use two-factor authentication on your Android device using an application or a dedicated hardware token. Because everything really, in terms of password reset, getting access to accounts, in some way revolves around exploiting SMS two-factor authentication. It's the most terrible, not well thought out two-factor authentication, really. And we're just using it for convenience.
It is convenient, but I suppose that's like a lot of security, especially cybersecurity. There's nothing convenient about it, and this is the problem. We tend to take the easy route. All right, so we've said banking accounts, probably the best thing to do is change cell phone numbers. Any other online accounts, change cell phone numbers. Facebook, leave it the way it is. You've already been breached. The data's out there. So the best thing is probably not to change anything on the one hand, or you do like I do, and you come from Russia and do other strange things. What is, yeah. So combined, we had the early 2019 breach that was 420 million accounts. We've now had the 533 million accounts. So we can safely almost say we're hitting that 1 billion mark. That's the size of these two breaches.
They're obviously complementary information in some regards, but a lot of it is overlapping, so that they're the same repetitive. But I haven't yet managed to process. I mean, it takes some compute power to go through this. I hasn't managed to go through the whole list yet and compare everything. But I expect about 30% overlap.
And what has Facebook's response been?
Have they responded?
Well, I saw a thing by Stuart Lewis the other day, blaming users. He said it's users' fault.
Yeah, that's a classic thing. Facebook doesn't respond, keeps it quiet, shoved under the rug for 2 years almost, and then comes out blaming the users for not, or for putting their phone numbers on there in the first place. It's like Mark Zuckerberg when he first created Facebook in his dorm room there, and was telling his friend how everyone's an absolute idiot for signing up to this thing and just giving me all the information. And that ethos is really carried through with the incident response still.
Yeah. And I suppose to avoid it completely going into the future is just not have these social media accounts. And if you do,
fill them with rubbish. Remove some of the pertinent stuff. But also, there's a lot of people that signed up to Facebook without a phone number and weren't affected with this. But that just happened to be the case because they were exploiting an API that was doing lookups based on phone number. So,
just for those that don't know, what is an API?
So it's generally an abbreviation for Application Programming Interface. And that means it's a way for a program to talk to a service. And it structures formats how data is expected to be input into that service and how it will be output to you. So it's just it's a protocol format, how you talk to the system.
And it's interesting in this case is that Instagram, that's also owned by Facebook, got all strict a couple of years ago, and the investigators that are in the audience will know this. And it frustrated us no end because it could tell quite a lot of our investigation techniques then, because they completely shut the API down and you had to have a real special cause to gain access to it. But it's just funny on the other side, Facebook didn't do it to Facebook. They were less strict about it.
Yeah, so if I can go back, I think, what was it, 2 years ago now? We had the big Cambridge Analytica situation breach where they managed to, using a marketing API again, scrape up about 70 million users' details. And they were doing that in a targeted manner, very similarly to how the phone number thing took place, just collecting whatever information they could via vulnerable inputs on the API, things where Facebook wasn't really checking, is this allowed to be possible in the code? And this thing, again, it's a very similar process. There weren't really good access controls in place. Some programmer oversights happened, and boom, someone had fun there. I'm actually still wondering how long it took them to get out these 533 million results, because I always ask myself, is anyone logging things at Facebook or when these data breaches happen? Like several large gigabytes just went to this one user from our API endpoint. Wonder what they might have done with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Or it was some sort of false flag operation. Yeah, very weird in that sense. That's why I struggled to understand why they went so strict with Instagram and so relaxed with.
Yeah, Facebook has locked things down a bit since the Cambridge Analytica breach happened, and then the 2019 two breaches happened again, and they're now getting rid of the various marketing APIs and analytics interfaces. It's also going to make OSINT a good deal harder, especially the email lookup feature via page moderator roles has been removed.
Yeah. Folks, if anybody's got any comments or questions, feel free. We'll unmute you and you can join the conversation by all means. Some upcoming webinars that we're going to be having in the next couple of weeks. On the 24th of April, we are going to be doing the latest legislation in the sense of registering SIM cards in Namibia. It's funny, it's off the back of this particular discussion. This may not be of interest to our foreign audience. Then on the 8th of May at 3 o'clock, we're going to be talking about children online and how they are susceptible to abuse and how children sexual exploitation material comes up, how pedophiles make use of that information, and how they take pictures of children to use as children erotica. On the 22nd of May at 3 o'clock, we've got a discussion surrounding, we're hoping to have an awesome guest speaker that day, is cybersecurity around the hospitality, tourism, and travel industries because of the high retention of personal data. So we're going to really have a good discussion for that. Silko asks, I had a phone call from an alleged F&B person yesterday, yet we do not bank there. Here it starts. Could this be from this? Your thoughts?
This is probably our well-known Namibian friend.
It could be, yes. Whatever his name is.
Did you get the phone call on a landline, perchance? And did he? What was his name that he uses, Andrew? I keep forgetting the name.
I don't have. Yeah, so if you can offer some detail, was it? It says landline.
Johan.
Yeah, that's
our well-known friend.
A well-known friend. He's very well-known in Namibia. You know, folks, I can tell you, this guy, we've actually traced him. We need a criminal case to nail him because we've got his bank details and we can't use that information without a criminal case. So if anybody's been defrauded by this clown, please let us know. Kathleen asks, regarding changing your cell phone numbers for online banking, could one use dual SIM cards? I think so, absolutely. What do you think, Rigo? It's just the IMEI number there.
Yeah, the IMEI number is a few digits difference between the two phones, between the two modems with each SIM card. But yeah, you can. Just don't get them confused. And keep an eye on which one is the scam number and which one is the non-scam number. Oh, the Johan guy, just tell him to, I don't know, have fun.
In your best choice of words.
What he usually does is he gets himself a phone book and then he just goes through the phone book one number after the other. So he's not even doing random dialing. He calls one number sequentially, the next one. So if you call the person that's next to you or below you in the phone book, chances are he's called them already. So tell your phone number neighbor, it's like, to be aware.
There's another fraudster hanging around on Facebook, and whenever you offer something for sale or you want to buy something, he's right there. He's in your face. He sends a personal message and says, "I'm ready to deliver."
but just a tip to the Namibians: if you ever get a call from your bank, hang up. Your bank doesn't call you.
Yeah, exactly. Or very rarely.
Your bank never calls you. Your money can be stolen overnight. Your bank here still won't call you. It's unfortunately sad, but yeah.
Okay.
Call your bank back, not via any phone number the scammer might provide. Look them up in the phone book.
Thanks for your question. I'm not going to mention the home's name. It's an old age home. A few of the residents were defrauded by this person. Yeah. It's more comment than a question. The thing is this, you know, without framing criminal cases, we're pretty helpless. Nobody can do anything without a criminal case, and we certainly can't be vigilante and take the law into our own hands, because then we'll end up in jail.
Some of the legislation for dealing with these types of crimes.
That too, yes. That's true, yeah. I don't know, Emanuela, if you want to comment on that, because I know you guys have got way advanced legislation in the States at the moment as well, in terms of prosecuting online fraudsters. So it is an issue, I mean, at the end of the day. Do you want to comment on that, Emanuela?
You probably unmute.
On what we can do as investigators in the US privately without a criminal case? Yeah, there's nothing much. I mean, for anything financial, you really need a criminal case.
A criminal case, yeah.
It's a gray area, but yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. But you've got bureaus like the FBI and that sort of thing who deal with most of these cyber crimes, don't they?
FBI is more for identity theft, so it can be related, but yeah, no, most of the time, there's nothing much you can do. The victim, you know, files a report with the police. The police doesn't like, you know, pushing paper and does it with, you know, sometimes with delay, and then you get you get reimbursed for the charges. Yeah. You know, when it's a low-level scam, when like big-time financial crimes, you have task force, you have the FBI, you have different agencies. Together, but for low-level, you know, for individuals who come to us because their identity has been stolen, and there's nothing much you can do, just mitigate and prepare them to protect themselves for the next time.
Yeah.
So change. Practice good hygiene, as you say, cyber hygiene, to avoid another next time, basically.
Yeah, you were going to say, Rigo?
There's a question from Zilka again. The cell phone number that might have been leaked, is it the registration used cell phone number or the one that users might have put in their public and the profile for public view? And no, it's the registration phone number, but for a lot of profiles, if they put the phone number in their status or occupation, one of those text lines, it's also in there. And you can easily scrape the phone numbers from public views. There's already existing databases with just public information of Facebook profiles.
Yeah. Thank you, Emanuela. Any other comments, questions? Anything on your heart that you would like to share with everybody in the audience? The floor is open to anybody. Somebody here, sorry, Gregory, nearly missed it. Namibia started last year with drafting the data protection bill similar to POPI and SA. Hopefully that will be usable to criminalize such activities. Yeah, again, without people filing cases, this is the problem. Legislation will only do that much, but if we're not energetic about trying to curb cyber crimes and that sort of thing, legislation ain't going to help. And the law enforcement agencies have a lot of difficulty in acting on anonymous tips as well, or that type of activity, because it's very difficult for them to go and arrest somebody unless it's a real high crime such as treason or murder or something like that, where you don't necessarily need a complainant. But others, sadly, fraud is one of those. You need a complainant to put that. That's the one side of it. The other side of legislation, which a lot of people miss when it comes to cybercrime, if your suspect is sitting in the country next door, your local laws don't apply to them. So that's the other issue. So cybercrime, unfortunately, is a transnational crime. From a security perspective from Jorn, in your opinion, do social media companies do enough to secure the data? I'm referring in particular to database structures like cross-site scripting, etc. It's a good, excellent question, Jorn. Just one thing before you answer, Rigo. If I have my information correct, Facebook is using old technology. The original database is called Orion. and I believe it's still in place.
I'm not actually sure what database Facebook is currently using, but I'm very sure it's a NoSQL database of some form, because their structuring is atrocious.
Yeah, it's a flat database.
Yeah, it's NoSQL, Orion NoSQL. I think it's been updated at this point. Very modified, most likely. But in terms of database structure, cross-site scripting, etc., I would say yes, because the actual vulnerabilities that do get found as part of bug bounties, security hacking challenges, whatever researchers discover are not your basic elementary cross-site scripting, SQL injection, stuff like that. They're much more advanced, that often chain 8 to 9 different exploits together in terms of to get actually into the system somewhere.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen any, except for these 2 data leaks, which happened in a sort of silly way because it was an API that somehow escaped scrutiny. But I haven't actually seen any advanced exploits being done against the social media site that really got reported on. I don't think they will really show up. But in general, they're doing a pretty solid job. The bar of difficulty to actually get in, to get unauthenticated access or user data out is pretty tricky.
Absolutely. And I think just to clarify and put some sense to this, I think the security of, say, Facebook and Google, for example, is massive. You won't get better security in the world, but their privacy is completely shot. You've just got no privacy. And anybody that thinks that Gmail is a good option for emailing services, they read every single email that you send. So just understand that, and anything that's in that email, they sell to their marketing partners. So just that you understand
as a nice keyword package.
Yeah. So just understand that perspective. There's no such thing as a free lunch in life.
And,
so
just something to add to that. There's a lot of large intelligence agencies that subscribe to the marketing data, marketing analytics APIs, etc. for the big social media sites. And that's really all you need to build up pretty extensive almost anyone.
Yeah. So yeah. If there are any more questions or comments, please feel free. In the meantime, Rigo, we've got a small announcement to make in terms of training. That is our new security user level training. It's a hands-on practical training course, and it covers, for example, let's run up the curriculum. You get an introduction to the entire course, how it works and what we're going to be covering. We then cover the user factor in the sense of users, because us as the human beings are the weakest link in the entire chain. Then we teach you about a little bit of system preparation, how to prepare your systems, what you should do to make yourself a lot more secure in a very practical, hopefully not in such a technical thing. This is not a technical course. The whole idea is to give you practical training. We teach you about social engineering, how to identify it, where to expect it from, what its impacts are in its different forms. And then the big one, we provide understanding between the World Wide Web and the internet. Very few people know there's a difference between the two. So we cover that too. Then we cover the big one, malware. What is it? What does it look like? Would you be able to identify it? What does it do to your system, for example? And then phishing. We all hear about phishing, and it's not the phishing we do at the sea. It is phishing that happens online. We talk about spear phishing, smishing, and vishing. So all the different ones there. And vishing, which is voice solicitation. Our research indicates there's a massive trend upwards on vishing attacks. So just be aware. We then cover targeted attacks, what happens when an attack is targeted. In that sense, we talk about email and two-factor authentication strategies to add to that aspect, and then browser safety, how to secure and make use of browsers safely. Password management, the big one. We've all got those 3 passwords that we keep recycling and don't tell anybody about it. And we've been doing it for 10 years. So we teach a bit about password management there too. Social networks, Facebook, Twitter, and the rest. We cover some mobile devices in that as well, how to stay safe on your cell phone. And we do data security in motion. So data security in motion is everything that you do over the internet. In the next course up from that, we do data security that is stored data. So just to give this one the right context, we cover it with data in motion. And then hacked, what happens when you are hacked? What is the contingency to create less panic, to create less frustration, and to try and get yourself out of the situation peacefully and better off at the end of the day. And then we conclude that. So that is the new course. It's in production currently. It will come up in May. Have you got that slide, Rigo?
Which slide?
The slide for the course.
Ah.
Oh dear, we messed that one up. Anyway, if you want to attend the course, please email us at info@synetio.com. We'll put it in the follow-up email that comes out after this webinar for your benefit, including the code, but it must be, you must register for the course before May, before we launch. So if you'd like to join it, you will get a fantastic 15% discount, which on 1,000 Namibian dollars, which equates to about 140 US dollars. So it's, I think, a very well priced course for what you get. And it's particularly useful for companies as well. Yeah.
67 US if it's 1,000.
67, sorry. My maths is not, it's Saturday afternoon, forgive me. 67 US. And it's also pretty useful for companies. So if you want 2, 3, 4, 5, 50 employees trained, what we do is we set a limit to the time period of the course, say 4 weeks, and then we have a follow-up workshop as well, included in the price. So there's no additional price in there either. So we're very excited about that. So please, if you'd like to join us on the course, email us and we'll give you the 15% discount gladly. What's the email address? It is info@synetio.com. Don't worry about it. There will be a follow-up email after this webinar. Everything that we've discussed will be in there, including a recording of this webinar, which we're now going to stop.